Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney. That's Nick Zararis. And Nick, well, they blew a 3-0 lead to Dallas. And then they followed that up with a big overtime win against the Devils. And then they followed that up with a regulation win against the current best team in the NHL, the Vegas Golden Knights. Are we starting to see signs of life again?
First of all, let it be known that this is one of the shows that has been pounding the drum about what a good season Sam Carrick's been having since the start of the season. We have week after week, it's been who's had a good week, and it's like Sam Carrick, Will Cooley, occasionally Adam Fox, Shesterkin most of the time. But Carrick's having a nice season. It was good to see. And it's funny because I was looking down and I looked back up in the overtime against the Devil, and I was like, is that Sam Carrick getting into 3-on-3 overtime shift
on the ice at the same time
on the ice the same time as Jack Hughes in 3-on-3 overtime? I like squinted like really, really hard at the TV and then realized, oh yeah, that's right, that is Sam Carrick. And then he went down and scored. And then Saturday night
made a great play on Jack Hughes
he had a really nice game against the Devils. And then Saturday night against Vegas, they played okay. I have no real qualms about how they played. Vegas is a good team, and you beat good teams. That says something about you. And for the last 2 weeks or so, I would say the concern has been, what is the new normal? What is this team actually going to look like now that you've gotten what you consider the bad actors out of here? You know, now that you've gotten Trouba and Kakko out of here, what do you think this team actually is? And how good is it capable of being? And in the last 10 games, the underlying numbers have stabilized to some degree. They have found two functional pairs. The Vakanainen and Schneider pair is still a little bit underwater, but it's not getting obliterated, so that's functional. The big issue over the last two and a half weeks is the special teams have been atrocious. That they're conceding like a power play goal every third penalty kill. They're still below 17% on the power play over the last 2 weeks. And it's a shame because if they had functional special teams right now, in conjunction with the 5-on-5 results they're having, they probably have a better record than 4-5-1 in their last 10, and we'd probably be having a slightly different conversation. But as you know, and as we've said a lot this year, when you're having the season from hell where you can't get things to work out, even if you fix certain things, that doesn't mean the leaks you filled before are going to suddenly not start leaking again. It's really difficult to manage when it feels like no matter what you do, even if you make progress and fix one thing, something else immediately starts to break again. You know, the penalty kill, which was the only good thing for the first 3 months of the season, now they're getting good 5-on-5 results and they can't kill off anything. It's really a conundrum. And it's just kind of, I think it's the strongest evidence that even if they do settle out here and things kind of stabilize and they play 550 points percentage hockey, it's still going to be really bumpy most of the way.
That, and you take a look at this, like their last winning streak was in November.
Yeah.
This is the middle of January, I want to point out. They haven't had a win. They beat San Jose 3-2. They beat Seattle 2-0, and then they beat Vancouver 4-3. This was November 14th, 17th, and 19th. Today is January 13th, nearly 2 months later, and this is the first time they have won back-to-back games. That is, I mean, alarming is I feel like
alarming would imply that like there was an active emergency going on. Like everyone's dead already. You know, the police have showed up. They've drawn the chalk outlines on the ground and there's blood everywhere.
Yeah.
The emergency for the alarm is over.
It's not good, let's say, to say the least, to put it in the most simplest terms, that is not good trademark. But they did, like, it'd be one thing if, you know, you take a look at their schedule and you go, okay, well, they beat Chicago. Like, let's say the next game was against Buffalo or San Jose or whatever, and then that was their 2-game win streak. Yeah, well, Chicago is just miserable. But like, if that was their 2-game win streak, you think to yourself, okay, I mean, it's good that they didn't lose those games, but I'm not, as a fan, as a viewer of this team, I'm not gathering any confidence because they beat on the actual dumpster fires of the league. They beat they should have beaten Dallas. Let's be honest. Like they had a 3-0 lead. They threw that game pretty hard. Okay, you follow that up. You beat New Jersey in overtime, which is not only a team that's good, but a team that actively wants to destroy you because they're the Devils and this is a division rival. Not that okay. Sam Carrick has a great game. They win that. They win that 3-2. And then you get to Vegas, a game that by all accounts should be one of those trap games where this is a late night Vegas trip. Vegas is obviously looking good. They're playing well. Rangers have been very up and down this season. What's going to happen? No one knows. It's going to be a roller coaster as it always is. First period, the Rangers played really well. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wait, is this the same? Am I watching the Rangers right now? What's going on? And so they played well, and they hang on to win in regulation against the standings points wise the best team in the NHL. If you want to argue Winnipeg or standings points wise, Vegas right now is the best team in the NHL. So the fact that they got these two wins back to back is objectively impressive. And are we back? Are we back? Is this false hope? Like I don't know. And I right now it's kind of a game to game. I mean, they got Colorado tomorrow. That's going to be a tough game. Colorado got shut out in their last game, so they're going to be upset and hungry for goals. What the question that I have is which Rangers team will show up tomorrow? That's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, that's really one of the differentiation points between what's a mediocre team, a good team, and a great team is when you're a great team, you know what you're going to get when you put the TV on or you sit down in your seat at the game. That was one of the real pleasures of the team last year was even though it wasn't always the prettiest, they won the majority of their games and made it look reasonably functional as they did it. It wasn't just special teams. It wasn't just 5-on-5. It wasn't just goaltending. Most nights you knew you were getting at least two of those three prongs to success. And one thing you said earlier that they hadn't won two in a row since November. This is the first time the Rangers have 20 regulation losses on January 13th since 2018-19. The season they picked second overall and ended up taking Kakko and were objectively one of the least talented Rangers rosters ever assembled. And that was on purpose. That team, that first David Quinn team, was assembled with the mindset of we're not trying to win this year. We will put some chips in when the time comes, but we are not actively trying to win games. And I think the fact that a team with as much talent as this team has on paper, where you have a Norris Trophy winner, a two-time Hart Trophy finalist, a Vezina winner, multi-time Vezina Trophy finalist, 100-ish point forwards, 50 goal scorer, and a former first overall pick, and you have 20 losses this early in the season. I think that's a strong case for everything possible going wrong. And one of the things that they really needed, and as much as we've bemoaned the consistent featuring of Ryan Lindgren in spite of his performance. And I was talking about this with one of my friends Saturday night when we were at dinner, and he goes, how come they keep playing Lindgren even though we know he's all bad and the team probably knows he's bad?
I like that before you go on. I really, really enjoy that every time like you go to social events, everyone flocks to asks you
we just talk about sports.
Like, what the
That's
hell
all
is
we
like
do.
what the hell is wrong with this team? Like I think that's really funny. Anyways, go on.
Whenever we hang out, all we do is talk about sports. I mean, it's not like we talk about our feelings. Come on now.
What are those? I don't know what those are.
We're not talking about our feelings. We're talking about sports. Football was on, but the Ravens were smoking the Steelers, so we started talking about hockey. And it goes, how come the Rangers keep doing this? And the best evidence I have is they're trying to hawk to him. They're trying to pump and dump him. They're trying to be like, he plays first pair minutes. He plays with our best defenseman. We think if you take him, he could really help you in the playoffs. And that's all I got. Because objectively, when you watch Ryan Lindgren play, the decision-making is not there. The physical ability is not there. You could talk me into, well, if the physical results weren't there, but the decision-making and the positioning were still there, okay, he's a flawed, injured guy who doesn't have as much foot speed as he used to, and he's compensated by making changes to his game, similar to the way that the longer Trouba stayed in New York, the deeper he would start in the defensive zone every time teams would attack him, so that he kept everything in front of him. And the problem with no doubles defense is you give up a lot of singles and singles start to accumulate. But as far as Lindgren, They are getting passable results over the last 10 games with him and Adam Fox, and then Miller and Borgen. The one thing I will say is number one, Miller and Borgen have 120 something minutes together. That is not enough of a sample that I feel like I can confidently state this is going to work the rest of the season. It's encouraging because for most of the season we haven't had one functional defensive pair, and to have two pairs which on paper are functioning, that gives you a path most nights. We talk about the idea how we allocate our ice time. If your first two defensive pairs at even strength can play 37 to 38 minutes of 5-on-5. Most of those guys are going to comprise your penalty kill and your power play. So we're talking about 44 to 48 minutes of ice time. And then if we only got to play Schneider, Vakanainen 13, 14, 5-on-5 minutes, and that's only needs to just not be terrible, it doesn't even need to be good, suddenly you're starting to talk me into, okay, the defense can be passable. The goaltending, which hasn't been incredible, but still good, you can talk me into them hanging around with that formula. Now, hanging around and being good are very different things, as the Islanders of the last 3 years will attest to. It's great to rack up the loser points. The loser points will keep you in the mix. The Leafs last year had almost as many loser points as the Islanders, but because they're the Leafs, no one particularly cared. The Rangers don't have those loser points banked right now. They have two. They've had two overtime losses this year.
One of them they shouldn't even had. They should have won that regulation.
They have two overtime losses. They have 20 regulation losses. This is a team that desperately needs to rattle off, 3-4, 4-5 to make up some ground. And I know with 40 games to play and everybody around them being actively degrees of actively bad, people are starting to talk themselves into this. And like, number one, it's not a bold prediction to say a team 4 points out of a playoff spot is going to make the playoffs. Like we can all be adults here and say it's not bold. If you want to say they're going to make, one of the division spots, okay, that's bold. This is a mediocre team in a very mediocre Eastern Conference. They have more star power than the teams they're in direct competition with. And that's your case, that the guys they have play passably enough that we can wait till Panarin gets going, till Kreider gets healthy, till Adam Fox gets going, till Shesterkin goes on his mid to late season heater that he's good for every year. You can talk me into one of those. I struggle to think that defense and goaltending is going to be the path out of this, just because that's so hard to do. I mean, even as good as the defense has played in terms of underlying numbers over the last few weeks, they're still giving 3.5 goals up per game. That's not good enough when they don't score. They're only scoring 2.6 goals a game and you're conceding 3.7. That's not enough. And even though the defense and the goaltending has been better the last 2 weeks, it's still not good enough.
It's better, but yeah, like you said, it's not where it needs to be. The problem is that the Rangers have had improvement defensively in these past couple of weeks. However,
they went from poop to fart.
They
haven't made a lot of progress.
They went from absolute atrocity to slightly above that. So yeah, they've improved from where they were, but this is still not great. Like that's the biggest key here that people have to step back and think about for a second. The defense has been better. Finally, it's the middle of January, but we're finally seeing players try in their own zone to not have the puck go in their own net. That's progress. We're doing better. The problem is that
in goals against for the year, 24th goals against per 60, and
the problem is that like where we are now, where the team is right now, is better than what it was comparatively to a few weeks ago, but that doesn't mean it's good. So the question now becomes, okay, well, you've gotten yourself up from Dante's Inferno. You're right. You're not in the ninth, the seventh. Is it 7 layers, 9 layers, seven? All right, yes. You're not in the 7th layer of hell anymore. You're up in the 3rd. You're still down there though. You gotta keep going if you want to get out of there. So that's where the Rangers are defensively right now. The question is, okay, well, then the next couple of weeks here, you got Colorado, you got Utah's whatever, but Columbus is on a heater, Montreal is on a heater, Ottawa's on a heater, Flyers are bad, Colorado, and Carolina. Okay, well, you lost a bunch of games earlier on that we talked about a few weeks ago that you should have won. got the bank those points to be able to be afforded, a loss every now and again to some of these teams. Okay, well now you don't have that window. You don't have that cushion. You have to go raw dog against all these teams, essentially like forcing your way to get these points because you don't have time. You've lost 20 regulation games. It's January 13th. You don't have the time. You cannot go into some of the I don't know what is this 3 6. They have 8 games left this month. You can't go into it thinking, okay, like if we just win 5, we'll be okay. You have to win 6. Probably should win 7 to get back to a relatively comfortable position in the standings. Are you confident in their ability to do this right now? I don't know if my answer is yes.
Oh no, this team should not be inspiring anything in terms of confidence. If you want to say they have the potential or the capacity, sure. I think that's perfectly reasonable to say a team with the high-end talent that they have, even though it's underperformed this year, is capable of doing it. Nothing they have done this year would lead you to believe they are actually going to do it. That's kind of the difference when, you talk about potential versus results. Eventually, you need to capitalize, materialize that potential into results. Otherwise, it's nothing. Potential is great in theory. It's why prospect writing and prospect evaluation is a potential and viable business model. But eventually, those prospects need to be players. And in this case, the Rangers' best players need to play like it. You need Kreider to come back from this back injury that's been bothering him all season and to be the dominant power play net front guy, because for the Rangers' math on a nightly basis, they almost guaranteed need that one power play goal a night to make their math work. They are still not scoring enough. On the season, the Rangers have only scored 122 goals through 42 games. That's less than 3 a game. They are not scoring enough goals over the course of the long season. And you compare that to the last few years where, yes, the strong goaltending has always been the backstop, the foundation. But that power play has been top 5 for the last 3 seasons consecutively. And when you score on the power play 25 to 30% of the time in the regular season, that's one goal pretty much every other game. Because if we're going to say that an average team gets 3 power plays per game on a given night, and you go 1 for 3 or 1 for 4, you get 1 for 4 would be like 1.25 out of 6, 1.5 out of 6, something like that. That's every other game you're getting at least one goal. Right now, they're under the league average in terms of power play conversions. And because of that, they are fundamentally not scoring enough. So, yeah, it's great. The defense has been better. It's great. The goaltending has been better, but they're not scoring enough. And then, the penalty kill's been actively bad the last 2 weeks. They've had 33 kill opportunities in the last 10 games, and they've conceded 11 power play goals against in that window. So the math, again, it's not mathing there. And I know it sounds silly to kind of reduce this out to, well, if we need to score 4 a night and they only can score 3, what's our path to 4 goals? But that's the way we talk about it in football. That's the way we talk about it in basketball. Of if we need to score 118 points tonight as a basketball team, how many possessions do we need? What does that mean in terms of how many rebounds do we need? How many second chance? How much transition? How much quick strike offense do we need? It's the same thing in football. If we're going into Buffalo next weekend as the Ravens, how many points do we need to score? How many points do we need to score? How many possessions do we think we need to get that? And in hockey, you have infinitely more possessions than you do in football, than in baseball. But working it out in your head, if you're only scoring 2.5 goals per night at 5-on-5, that's not enough. The league average in today's NHL is about 3.25 to 3.5. That's it, and it's varying. We still got to get to the end of the season to see where that number levels off. But with that in mind, you need to score more. So if we want to reduce every game to a 2-1, 3-2, it's going to be really hard to win a lot that way. If it's great, you were able to do it against the Devils, against Vegas. Those are good teams. They score a lot of goals. It shows you have the capacity to do it. But one of the recurring themes on this show for years now has been, how many ways can you win a hockey game? What is your path to victory on a given night? Great teams, they can win in a variety of ways. They can outscore you. They can get into those 2-1, 3-2 rock fights. They can win on special teams. If it gets to overtime, one of the lasting memories I have of last season is that 3-on-3 against Colorado, where the Rangers, who do not have 3 players as good as Nathan MacKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, and Cale Makar, The Rangers won that 3-on-3 overtime. That is a sign of a team that was feeling it, that was able to play a bit above their capacity in terms of talent because of how good they were feeling about their game.
Sure.
Right now, this team, it really only feels like the only way they can win is these low scoring, close games. And it just puts a lot of stress on your guys, especially your stars, to be the difference in those close games. You know, that's what we bemoaned about the Gerard Gallant iterations of this team was he was consistently trying to coach low event hockey and saying, all right, 5 minutes to go. Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, let's go. We need a goal. And it's hard to do that, to expect your star players to
Of
give you that
course.
every single night. And it might be the Rangers' only path. So we might be in a beggars can't be choosers situation. But it's hard to feel confident it is really hard to feel confident that this is a sustainable path to victory consistently, especially with the schedule they have left. You know,
Right.
they got to play a lot of division games down the back half of this season, and those are 4-point games.
Yeah, and the thing about this too is you take a look at the game against Washington a couple of weeks ago, like the game against Dallas last week, where they were able to score a bunch of goals, but in those games where the offense actually woke up and was providing pretty solid results, their defense let them down. Their goaltending let them down, and you can't you can't do both. Like if you're gonna lose games 9-8, like we're back in the '80s, that it's still 2 points that you're leaving on the board. Whether you lose 9-8 or you lose 1-0, ultimately you gain or lose the same amount of points. And the Rangers have to figure out a way that
To score
allows
more.
them, well, sure, but allows them to be more creative offensively. That doesn't result in
Giving it back.
constant 3-on-1s, 3-on-2s. And I follow Jack Hahn, and he has a really good breakdown of the Rangers' problems right now on his Twitter, on his Patreon as well. Of the Rangers right now are playing sort of reckless hockey, where they are essentially trying to force creative offensive creativity and trying to force the outlet and the transition, but they're being too reckless in the defensive end, which is causing them a lot of turnovers in their own zone, a lot of bad transition plays that lead to goals against. So they didn't that's the transition game has been the Rangers' MO, bread and butter, for the last few seasons now, but this season in particular, it has really broken down. So right now, it is up to them to understand fundamentally why this is happening and how to fix it and stop giving the puck up in your own zone 90 times a game. Like this, it feels like the most basic one-on-one thing to do, to say, and to try to get this team to do. Hey, by the way, you're a pro hockey team. Please don't give the puck up to the other team in your own zone if you want to win hockey games. That is a very, I know I'm breaking news, I'm blowing minds over here, but that's fundamentally what the Rangers have to do to step up in improving their defensive issues. There's been a lot of giveaways. There's been a lot of pucks that should have cleared that haven't cleared. The passes don't go through. They're again still forcing these either long passes or passes that are very easily readable by the other team, and they intercept and they go either on a rush or they in their own zone, and it's they got to clean that up, and that's step one. And that's we're not even in the offensive zone yet. You're still in your own zone. The puck is in your own zone, either behind the net or around the circles. You got to get it out in such a way that one doesn't create a chance the other way immediately, and two, a way that gets the puck out and creates a chance for yourself. The Rangers were good at doing that before, and they kind of lost that.
It's It's a calculated risk. You know, we talked about that a ton last year, that Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere, you were willing to overlook and give a pass on the bad defense because they were creating so much offense. You know, you have to, at certain points of the game, make calculated trade-offs that you to create more, you have to give something back. The problem is the Rangers are giving a lot back and they're not creating enough. You know, the entire premise of conceding defensively to create more offense, to be more risky, more creative, is that you're going to actually create more offense. And when you don't do that, all you're doing is adding volatility to your recipe, and hockey to begin with, it's a very volatile sport where one odd man rush, a 2-on-1 getting the goalie moving is one of the most high percentage plays in the sport. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Rangers' ability to blow that 2-0, which was one of the funniest layoff passes I've ever
Didn't even
seen.
get a shot on goal.
Didn't get a shot on goal.
Like, what are we doing?
Didn't make the goalie move left
Yeah.
to right. The goalie just stayed square in the middle of them and didn't do it. It's just mind-boggling levels of overthinking. And at a certain point, when you get to this point in a season where everything has gone wrong and everybody knows that there's a fire burning and someone is getting thrown overboard, at the end of this season, there are going to be notable changes.
When you said fire burning because of mold, I thought of Sean Kingston.
That's not that old of a reference. We're in the same age bracket. Firebirding, Sean Kingston,
That
special
was
music.
what, 2009?
That was middle school. That was like 2008 or 9, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
a long time ago. But another team, Chris Drury torpedoed. But that's
right.
That's another story for another
Time
day.
is a flat circle.
It is. It is. It's remarkable that we don't talk about that in the narrative of like James Dolan got taken for a ride by this guy 15 years ago and he just kept him around. Like, is there something we don't know about that friendship that like in most professional sports, if you take advantage of a rich owner, they spend the rest of their life being vengeful of like, I gave you all this money and you were a terrible player. And in the Rangers case, they made him the GM and the president after cultivating him in an incubator for half a decade where he said no to multiple jobs and stayed here. Just remarkable in terms of narrative. But in terms of like, everybody knows that there's going to be changes. There might be changes as soon as the trade deadline. And one thing, speaking of the trade deadline, I do find interesting. I think it's hilarious the Rangers won 2 games in a row, and then all of a sudden it went from, how can we get JT Miller to, well, they're right back in the mix. It's just remarkable how there's no object permanence from anyone.
That'd be too easy.
Because and the same thing with the Canucks. They had a okay week last week, and then all of a sudden it was, well, they'll figure this out. I mean, Quinn Hughes is having a Hart Trophy caliber season with 8 functioning figures right now. He's been one of, if not the best players in the entire NHL. At a certain point, it comes down to the hockey. You can read as many of these columns as you want. You can listen to as many podcasts as you want. A lot of these guys are just guessing right now. Nobody is out of it yet. That's why this is going to come down to the wire. And I think it's one of the really interesting stories.
Chicago's out of it.
Well, yeah, we could say Chicago's out of it. But,
San Jose too.
But those teams aren't going to there's nothing of interest for them to really sell off.
Sure.
If the Blackhawks want to sell off 39-year-old Alec Martinez to the Leafs for a 6th round pick, sure. But in terms of the Rangers and their narrative, they got decisions to make. We'll see about EJ Raddick's proclamation that they're going to get a 1st round pick for Will Borgen. Hilarious that, the Rangers are trading a 2nd overall pick and a later pick for a guy who's playing, 3rd pair minutes on a mediocre team. But we'll see about Will Borgen. You have to assume that Ryan Lindgren is a pump and dump, that they're going to trade him ahead of the deadline because they don't want to lose him for nothing.
I think that's a fair assessment because of the contract they gave him this season.
Yeah.
If they were really sold on this guy long term, they would have given him a 4 or 5 year deal with term. Might have been for maybe less money than he currently has, but just a way to keep him around for a long time. Clearly, they didn't feel that way. They gave him a 1-year deal to essentially prove it or lose it, and he's not proving it. So they have to, like you said, kind of prop him up on a pedestal and say, look at what we've got. This guy's playing top line minutes. Look at all the things look at all the shots he's blocking. Look at all the injuries he's playing through and somehow that makes him a more coveted asset. That's strange to me. Anyway, look at this. Like, we have all these lights underneath him to make him shine. Like, they're polishing him up like it's like he's a statue. Like, they are really trying to shine, like make him shiny in all aspects. So I would agree that, Ryan Lindgren is not going to be a Ranger for too much longer. And for the Rangers, that's like, I get it. Locker room guy, gritty, sandpaper, whatever you want to call him, on the ice, he can't play defense, and that's all I care about.
On top of that, an aside off of that, because I watched the Ducks play the Ducks play the Oilers, and I forget who I watched them play this past week, but watching the Ducks in the last 2 weeks, number one, the Ducks are doing the same exact thing with Brian Dumoulin that the Rangers are doing with Ryan Lindgren, where they're playing him way too many minutes. But because he plays that style of hockey that teams like, especially going for the playoffs, there's no better career rehabilitation as an NHL player than going to a bad team and playing a ton of minutes, because everybody doesn't watch very clearly. Like in Frank Saravelli's column, where he was like, the Oilers would love to have David Savard. And then you go and look at David Savard's underlying numbers, and they're all in like the low 40s. And it's like, he won a Stanley Cup 3 years ago, playing 14 minutes a night on the Lightning. And it's just like, do you watch these games? These
No.
defensemen don't have the traits requisite to be successful in the postseason.
In
You
that
watch
same column, Frank was like, "Oh, Ryan Lindgren is playing terrible defense. Oh yeah, like teams are gonna line up to trade for him because he's a playoff player." Wait, you can't. These are two separate
these are
things, Frank. I don't know if
diametrically
you know
opposed
this.
ideas. They outright contradict one another.
Yeah,
It, it,
that's
it's Lindgren and Borgen. I think I know there's been I won't say a groundswell, but I will say there's been a notable minority of people who are saying, well, if Borgen and Miller are functional, why don't we just keep him? Number one, he's basically impossible to forecast what a contract is going to look like because of his career profile. This is a guy who's 28 years old and hasn't played a ton of NHL hockey. Like, he's 28 years old. He was a draft pick 10 years ago, and he has 258 career NHL games. How do you walk into a negotiation with a guy with that career path and say, I know what I'm going to pay you? Because he's probably got one real chance to get a decent contract because he's been up and down. He hasn't really had a real direct path to steady NHL minutes until the last 2 or 3 years. You could sit down across from him and be like, we like your fit with K. Andre. We would like to see you here for a full season. Is he going to spend his year 28, 29 season on a team where he has no idea what the trajectory is going to be next season? Is he going to bet on himself in free agency and try and go to a bad team to play first pair minutes to try and get traded to a good team at the deadline next year and then walk to free agency? It's really hard to forecast what Borgen would be worth. And that's why I don't think the Rangers should frankly consider keeping him past the deadline, because if you can turn him into a fourth round pick,
first round pick.
Brother, I'd take a fourth round pick. Like, and look, I get it. He's tall, he skates well, he's American, and NHL GMs love that shit. They genuinely do. I mean, the Rangers over the last handful of years have cultivated an entire brood of tall young guys from Western Canada and the United States because for whatever reason that's deemed virtuous. And then, we've got the Kreider thing where his name's been out there all season. He hasn't played well. He's got 2 years left on that contract. He's got some no trade protection. I don't think you're trading him at the deadline. I feel like that's more of a summer move than a deadline move. But I really hope, and we talked about this a lot earlier, they cannot allow short-term results to sway what they do at the deadline, because that's kind of how they keep getting into these problems. Is they buy the short-term returns and say, well, if we did this, we can do this, and don't ever really fundamentally address the issue. Because you look at this team right now and you think about the ages of their most counting stat producing players. They're all over the age of 30 other than Adam Fox. Your next best point guy after Zibanejad, Trocheck, Kreider, Panarin is Lafreniere, who I don't think right now, at least, is capable of driving his own line or being a point per game player without help. And you start to really get hazy as far as what the roster looks like if the changes that we keep hearing about actually come to fruition. And that uncertainty, it makes it very easy for me to talk myself into the team making the wrong decision of, well, we're in a playoff spot on March 4th. The trade deadline's tomorrow. We can't sell Ryan Lindgren. We can't sell Will Borgen. We can't sell guys from this team. We're right here. All we got to do is get in, and we have the best playoff goalie in the NHL. And we have a defenseman in Adam Fox who's capable of breaking the game. We have Panarin who's capable of breaking the game. And that's really my big concern right now. And it sounds counterintuitive to say, wow, they had a good month. That's bad. But when we're talking about the goal of winning the Stanley Cup, that's not a linear path of good hockey, win Stanley Cup. We've done that. We've tried that
We
of
have.
good regular season trying to win the Stanley Cup. It has to be about the long-term vision. It really does. And if it isn't, we can all shrug our shoulders and say, well, the GM doesn't get it. Because as long as they keep losing, the trade talks will pick back up. If they keep winning games, those trade talks and the narrative that the team is falling apart will disintegrate. They'll go away like they have over the last week and a half, 2 weeks.
It's really going to be interesting because they play 4 games this week. They play Colorado, Utah, Columbus, and Montreal. Let's say they win 3 of those games. You take your pick as to which 3. Let's say they go 3-0-1 this next week. You will start to notice immediately NHL Network, 32 Thoughts, Rangers are buying again. Kreider's not going anywhere. Lindgren's getting a lifetime extension. They should have never traded Trouba because look at what they're doing now. I can't believe they're doing this without Barclay Goodrow.
Barclay Goodrow, who is the worst player in the
Yeah.
entire NHL in terms of expected goals for and against.
Capo Caco was the problem all along because now that he's gone, the Rangers are playing well again. It's like, I can write these headlines without seeing in the future because we know that's what's gonna happen. All of the market, the big media writers and the all those guys are gonna show up and start touting how great the Rangers are again, and that Drew is gonna buy and JT Miller and insert other player here, like whoever the big draw of the trade deadline is going to be. There's going to be, like in a month from now, we're going to start hearing rumblings that X player on X team is the best player on this team wants out, and it's going to be a sweepstakes to figure out who's going to trade for him. And of course, the Rangers are going to be involved, regardless of their record at that point. By the way, because it's the Rangers, and that's what generates the clicks. And it's just like it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over these, because essentially these next couple of weeks determine the entire season and the entire trajectory of what the Rangers are going to do the rest of the season and in the summer and beyond. If they lose 5 of the next 6, and it's very obvious that they don't have it this year, the sell-off is going to be more dramatic. There's going to be more dramatic changes, and they are probably going to move in the right direction of long-term improvements towards getting back to Stanley Cup contention. If they win these next 5 of the next 6 or whatever, and they're right back into it, and they play that type of way, come the trade deadline, they're going to start buying again. They're going to sell off more of their prospects. I don't think guys like Gabe Perreault and Drew Fortescue are going anywhere, but I don't know these things for sure. So they might start selling off more pieces. Okay, and then they get to the first round of the playoffs. They get dumpstered because they're actually not a very good team. And now the long-term prospects are even more murkier because you don't have a ton of the cupboard to begin with. You're going to give some of that up to go on this run with this team that hasn't shown you anything all season long. And you expect me to believe in the long-term goal of this franchise? I don't know if I can. But again, Nick and I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we're on the same page here. Like we obviously want this team to succeed. That's the goal. We don't cheer for losses. We cheer for wins around here.
No, and
want.
real quick, an aside. I understand the mindset of tanking, whatever. Don't cheer the team to lose. Don't do that. That's weird. Objectively, it's weird. Like, if you want them to lose because you want a better draft pick, that's fine. But actively being happy the other team just scored, that strikes me as weird.
Yeah, that's weird. That's weird. Like we're out here, we're cheering for the Rangers to win, and we want what's best for the team in the short term and in the long term. So these next few games are essentially going to dictate how Drury handles the rest of the season and beyond, if he even gets there. And both situations to me are scary. There's I guess there's this third path where like they go 3-3, or and they're still trying to figure it. But even then, like that just gives them less runway to be buyers, because then you don't know if you're buying or you're selling. So you're kind of this in between. Like I don't know which outcome is better and which outcome is going to instill more faith in me as a fan of this team. Because again, if they win 5 of the next 6 games and they give you this hope that, okay, they're figuring it out, they're beating these either really good teams or really hot teams like Ottawa and Columbus and Montreal. If they can start winning if they can win these games, you take a step. It also depends on how they win these games. If it's like an 8-7 absolute catastrophe on defense, but the other team can't stop a puck either, so the Rangers win, that's one thing. But if they handily win some of these teams, and you can build if you start building the confidence of, okay, clearly their worst hockey is behind them, we can see a path to them potentially being a dark horse in the playoffs. Maybe we can have that conversation in a few weeks, but it's the window of opportunity is small for success. The window of opportunity for failure is wide open, and it's up to the Rangers and also Chris Drury to figure out which window they're going to go through.
There's a lot of variability, and it's one of those things where it's genuinely hard to sift through what's real and what isn't. This is why there's an analytics community. This is why there is a film community, because there is no universal truth. Sports aren't like the laws of nature where like gravity is a constant and it's always this because of this. Sports are very much a smoke, mirrors, magic, concoction type deal where there's some science to it, where you pour through the numbers and you compare that to what you watch. And if they don't match up, you try and discern between what isn't coming through in the numbers that's showing up on the tape. That then you get into cases where you have smaller samples, and that's how you have to try and determine things. We talk about the difference between regular season and playoff hockey. That's one of the real crucial criteria in terms of evaluation, is understanding the differences between the quality of opponent, understanding the differences in the style of play, and how your players handle those differing environments. And based on how you think about that, my biggest critique of the Rangers the last handful of seasons has been that they manage their problems as if they're just getting unlucky consistently, as opposed to this player physically is incapable of doing this, so we need to try this. Instead, the Rangers keep saying, well, we're very close. We're right there. We just need to tinker. We just need to tinker. And because of that, it's given the impression that the core is fine. We have 3 playoff runs of evidence that when push comes to shove against equal or better opponents, the style of preferred play by the Rangers' best players is not good enough to beat the quality of opponent it's going to take to win a Stanley Cup. But because the organization is locked into those players and is projecting the idea that this is bad luck, it has led to where we're at now, where the I won't say the alarms are going off as far as the core players being fallible and declining, but I think it's fair to ask, is Zibanejad in physical decline? Is Vincent Trocheck in physical decline?
He's
Is
been
Artet?
better though. Last couple weeks have been
They've
a
been
jet.
better.
Like
They've
it's
been
like
better.
this is. I'm glad. Like we haven't been harping over how bad they've been like this episode. They've been better. This
Yeah,
is great. Like this is like again, I want to highlight this too, because we mentioned when things get bad, like we want Zibanejad to play well. Like the whole point of the show is not to dunk on Mika Zibanejad. The whole point is hopefully the Rangers win the Stanley Cup and we can all celebrate. Like that's what we want.
yes,
So
I would like to see Mika Zibanejad turning a turntable with Eric Adams standing in the DJ booth, because Eric Adams is the most
he's
DJ booth.
everywhere. Yeah.
He's the most DJ booth coded mayor of all time. But at the end, talking about it in the aggregate, in the macro, the big picture, the goal is to win the Stanley Cup. You have had 3 good cracks at it. As flawed and mediocre as the team was that lost to the Devils in the first round, that team was perfectly capable of winning that series against the Devils. The chips just didn't fall their way. They have enough evidence to say that their core problem at their core and the way they try to win playoff games is too inconsistent or too volatile to consistently do. Because of that, you should take a step back and try and discern how can we get better. And they have taken the path of we just got to get a little bit more out of our best players. And at a certain point, we talk about the career trajectory of your early 20s, your early 20s, your mid 20s, your mid 20s, your late 20s, your early 30s, and the Rangers' most expensive players, Shesterkin and Fox aside, Zibanejad, Kreider, Trocheck, Panarin, they're forward, the most expensive forwards. Those guys are all in the age range where physical decline needs to be accounted for. The problem is you can't get out of any of those. Those guys are here for at least the foreseeable future, barring something changing in their respective calculuses. All of that is against the backdrop of they actually have to go out and play the games. Regardless of all of this like inside hockey conversation that we're going about here, the team still has to go out and play another 40 regular season games. Of those 40 games, you have a potential for 80 points. You probably need to get 95 standings points if you want to make the playoffs. 95 to 98 is probably the lowest you could get in with as the second wild card. And they're sitting right now with 42 points. To get 54, 55 points out of their final 80 potential points, you're going to need to win a lot of hockey games to get to that 90 something point threshold. Yep. You're going to need 27 wins over the final 40 games. That's a tall ask for a team that hasn't won 2 games in a row since early November before this past weekend. That's a really, really tall ask. Again, I said this earlier and I'll say it again. It's not impossible. They have the capacity to do it. I don't think they will do it.
Right.
Nothing they have shown you this year has shown they're capable of winning 27 out of 40, winning 28 out of 40.
The only thing that showed us is like the first 2 weeks of the season when they were playing well. And then after that, everything just kind of fell apart. And think about it this way too. The Rangers couldn't win 2 games in a row for 2 calendar months. All of a sudden they do, and the narrative immediately goes back to they're buying, they're right back. We're so back. We've never been more back. It's been 2 games. Again, if they win like the next 5, if they win 5 of the next 6, if they win 6 of the next 7, it's like, okay, then the building blocks are starting to appear and we have the foundation again. Until that happens, like the 2 wins were solid. They were against good teams and they played relatively well. If you lose against Colorado tomorrow, none of that matters, like really, truly, because they don't have this the leeway to lose games. If you want to get to the playoffs, if you want to be buyers this season, you have to beat Colorado. You got to beat Utah. You got to beat Columbus. You got to beat Montreal, Ottawa, Philadelphia, Colorado again, and then Carolina. You got to win at least most of these games if you want a shot at it. Until that happens, I'm out.
It's really that simple. The math is against them right now. They're going to need 98 standings points to probably make the playoffs. Maybe you get away with 96. They have 40. They have
January. It's the middle of January.
They have 40 games remaining. You have a potential for as many as 80 points. You're going to need 56 points over your final 40 games. That's a lot when you can't win 2 games in a row. Now, we can say they have stabilized defensively. That's what we started talking about on today's show. They have 2 pairs right now that are functioning in terms of expected goals and actual goals. That plays 40-something minutes a night. If you can survive with that and you get the power play going, they can absolutely get back in the mix. And this is what I wanted to wrap up on, because when you think about it, right now, as we sit here, Carolina is sitting 6 points ahead of them. Oh, wait, no, this is I'm still looking at the standings from 2019, the last time they had 20 losses. So right now, they have 42 points as we sit here right now. Pittsburgh is 2 points ahead of them. Montreal is 2 points ahead of them. Detroit is 2 points ahead of them. Ottawa is 3. Columbus is 4. Columbus is currently in the second wild card spot. Columbus has
an insane sentence, by the way.
Columbus has had a good week and a half. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. Detroit 7-3-1. Montreal 7-2-1. The Rangers have all of the teams that are currently in front of them other than Pittsburgh, I would say, don't have as much high-end talent as the Rangers. And even Pittsburgh's, it's old, it's frail. Their goaltending is
Malkin's on IR right now.
yeah, the Pittsburgh's goaltending is atrocious.
Mm.
The Rangers are perfectly capable of playing better than the teams in front of them. They also do need teams in front of them to lose games, which is one of the real tricky components of this, and why the second half of the season is going to matter so much. When you look about the games they have direct competition, the teams they have direct competition with, they still need to play because they still have 2 more games against the Bruins. They have 1 more game against the Sabres. They have 2 more games against Carolina. They have all 4 division games against Columbus left. They have no more against them. They have 1 more game against Montreal. They have 1 more game against the Devils. They have 3 more against the Islanders. They have 3 more against the Flyers. They have 2 more against Pittsburgh. They have 1 more against Tampa Bay. They have 2 more against Washington. You absolutely can get back in the mix if you win your division games.
Right.
If you beat Washington, if you beat the Devils, you beat the Islanders, you beat Columbus, you absolutely can get back in the mix because of the 4-point swings of those games.
That's the thing is like if they were to if they played all of those games or a lot of those games during the past 2 months when the Rangers couldn't do anything on either side of the ice, that would have been a massive issue. But again, now that they've stabilized a little bit here and they have all of these games remaining against the teams either right in front of them or right behind them, this second half of the season is like every single game essentially is massive.
The last point I want to make, and I'm gonna quote the great cinematography, one of the great movies of all time, Dodgeball: A True Underdog Story.
Not The
Sports,
Room. I thought you were gonna say The Room.
good reference, but alas, no.
Mm.
Sports reveal character. They don't build it. You are going to find out a lot what this group is made of over the next 40 games because this has a real summer camp is winding down and we all know we're never going to see each other again type feel. There are going to be big changes this summer because if there aren't, we can all officially call the GM on his bullshit and we can stop taking him seriously because we've been hearing for 2 years now that, oh, he wants to make big changes and he doesn't think what's going on is good enough. And he hasn't really done anything to prove that. So with that in mind, you have 40 games left for what's been a very successful window. You could argue this might be the most successful 4 or 5 year window in the entire history of the franchise over the last 3.5, 4 seasons. If you wanted to argue that, they don't have the great history that they project they do. This is one of the most successful periods in the history of the franchise, a real golden age. But time is undefeated. Time has even come for Tom Brady. Tom Brady is terrible on television. Time has even come for Tom Brady. So you can't even say, well, Tom Brady.
You might need some more time in the classroom. Maybe just a little bit.
And hey, if you want to talk about why guys need qualifications, Tom Brady just walked into a booth after doing 1 UFL game. Don't tell me about Mark Messier. Don't tell me about Sean Avery. Mark Messier can't even be bothered to look up who's on the Rangers. The last time he was talking, they were on national TV. He was talking about Kako, who hadn't been on the team in a week and a half. Like at a certain point, you got to stop taking certain people seriously. It's the same thing with the one of the podcasts that dominates the media space of, well, Drury would do anything to get JT Miller. Well, they won 2 games in a row, and all of a sudden I'm not hearing anything about JT Miller anymore. At a certain point, you are what you are. The Rangers might not be as hot ass as they were for 20 games. I'm still not convinced they are good.
They're lukewarm ass currently.
They're lukewarm ass. They might be, they're approaching room temperature ass. They're getting closer. They are getting closer. But we're going to find out what this group is made of because this next 40 games is going to be a real grind. They don't have an amazing group of depth. They have 2 defensive pairs they can kind of feel good about. They have 1 line that consistently scores at 5-on-5. They have Cooley. They need Hedel to get healthy. They need Kreider to get healthy. They get Hedel and Kreider healthy. You can talk me into the 5-on-5 offense being passable. They still need to get the power play going. If Kreider gets healthy, I have reason to believe that's doable. The elevator pitch is here. The problem is this stock would be worth about 5 cents on an IPO. You could convince me this team could do it. I don't think they're going to, though. That's the difference right now. Last year, I felt they had the capacity to play as good as anyone in the entire NHL. And over the stretch run, they proved it. They were the best regular season team in the league last year. This year, they're just another team.
These next few weeks are going to dictate the short-term future of the Rangers and the long-term future of the Rangers. If like we talked about a few minutes ago, if they continue to play well, there might be more hope building up, and maybe at the deadline, maybe they can't, no way they go all in. They didn't go in. They didn't go all in last season. They were the best damn team in the league. They didn't go all in. So I doubt they do that here, but they might be like small buyers. They might add, a third line winger. I mean, I know we haven't mentioned Arthur Kaliev, who was a guy in the games that he's played so far. Hasn't been bad though. So you know what?
He has a pulse.
That's a
He looks
positive.
like an NHL player.
Yeah. Of all of the waiver claims in Rangers history, Arthur Kaliev so far is definitely not one of the worst ones. He's been
better
okay.
than Adam Cracknell. I'll give him that.
He's been okay.
He's better than Matt Pumple. He doesn't have a hat trick yet, like Matt Pumple. But
Matt Pumple had a hat trick, man. You watch your tone. But yeah, it's these next few weeks are really important. Again, not just for this season, but for the future of this franchise. The next 5-10 years are essentially going to be dictated by what happens in these next 40 games. That can either be a positive thing if you are hopeful that this team has figured it out and they can make a run, or you are pessimistic and think, oh wait, okay, hold on, the management has mismanaged this team up until this point. Surely they're not going to do it again, right? Surely, and don't call me Shirley. Like there's two paths here. You got to pick which one you want to go down. These next few weeks decide everything.
Man, they got to go out and play. It's that simple. They have the capacity. You got to do it. It's great to have potential, but eventually potential gets wasted. That'll do it for this week's Liberty Blue. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you happen to be listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell. Andrew and I will talk to you guys next Monday, barring any breaking news